Hey, Anna.
Hi, Miss Deputy Mayor. We want to know what you think about what happened yesterday at Lamport with the police violence.
Well, violence is not acceptable.
Right.
It's never good. That's not how you solve. Police violence is not good. Any kind of violence is not good, right?
But we're here for police violence.
Yeah, I mean,
only the police were being violent yesterday.
I wasn't there. There's
Do you want to see pictures of police
can I
choking
finish?
people?
Can I finish? I've seen the pictures.
Uh-huh.
And very disturbing.
Uh-huh.
So I don't condone any of that. I think that's not the way that you solve housing. I think that.
So what happened to everyone who was at Lamport yesterday? How many households were there in the tents? There was about 20.
Yeah, 20.
20 people who were living in encampments.
I think yesterday what the report was saying is that 11 people were there, and so some people had already spaces in shelters actually, and then some more were given shelters, and some decided to leave.
Right.
And
Decided
how much
to
money
leave.
did that cost?
I don't know. I know that a lot of people have been asking for that. I know many people in my community have been asking for that. We put up forward that question as well.
What about Trinity Valets? Do you know the number of
No,
that?
we don't.
It's like
We're still
3
waiting.
million
Alexandra
for
Park?
20 people.
Yeah.
We don't.
And they don't
The
even
city
have
deployed
permanent
200
housing. Like,
dogs. Yeah.
it's like stupid. Like, we have a housing crisis.
Absolutely, I agree. I do a lot of work on housing. We just
yeah?
opened supportive modular housing. The first project was in our ward. I wish
So
you
why are
guys
we
had
spending $2
participated.
billion on police every year when we could be housing people in permanent housing?
Why do police have so much of the city funding? Like,
Yeah.
so much.
It's been an issue for a long time. I think that one of the things that we need to do and that we started to do is actually detask what the police do. I think
No,
there's a
we
lot
want
of
them.
things.
We want them defunded. We want them defunded.
Yeah, I mean,
and
we need
abolished.
funding in the
funding
community.
needs to happen with things that you're not supposed to do. I think there's a lot of things that we're asking the police
They
to do
cracked
that they
people's
shouldn't
skulls
be
open
doing.
yesterday. They're not supposed to do that, but they did
That,
that.
People have
it doesn't
broken
matter.
I was
bones.
amazed.
It doesn't matter how much funding. That should not happen.
So then where's
right?
the accountability?
So there's accountability offices for the police as well, but I think as well that there's a lot of tasks that we're asking the police to do that should not be done.
And have you
That's
asked them
why-
not to do those
that-
tasks?
Yes, we have. That's why we have
Are they
our
not listening?
projects.
Yeah.
For
They're
example,
refusing?
no,
They say they're
it's
taking
in
orders from the city.
It's in the works. For example, there's a lot of work on pilot projects for creating groups that are going to be responding to people in crisis. For
The
example,
MCAT teams?
the 911. We're looking into possibly taking it off of.
Yeah,
the
I mean, we're
list.
familiar with Reach Out Response Network and everything, but the fact is people got maced, people got pepper sprayed, people got concussions yesterday, people were arrested and detained arbitrarily. People were
Someone's
denied
wrist
their
was
right to
broken.
speak to a lawyer. People were held, with violating their charter rights.
Over and over and over. Like, what are you?
Can you explain though, but why were there 200 police deployed to deal with 20 people living in an
I can't
encampment?
explain
You
the
said
amount
11.
of-
You're
You
the
said 11.
deputy mayor. You need to explain it. You
And what about
actually
the
have to
$20
explain
million
it.
that we're spending on private security?
Counselors don't direct the police, so we don't direct if there's
As
20
deputy
police.
mayor, though, I
There's
think that
20
you
there's-
have a
can I
certain
finish?
responsibility.
Can I finish?
Try.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
So we don't direct if there's going to be 20 police or 200 police. That's not the job of
So then the
politicians.
So
police
it's
are
not,
just
you
rogue?
just wash your hands from that, but there's
They're
been
not
regularly over 200 police at Lamport, at Bellwoods, at Alexandra Park.
So what needs to happen
Yeah.
is we need to work with those residents to have them coming inside to the
To where,
shelters,
though?
To the shelters, to the hotel rooms.
Where the
to
COVID
supportive
has
housing.
been,
So
you
that
know,
they can get kicked out
explosive.
in the winter
There's no
when
COVID
it's
right now at the
finished?
shelters. Dr. DeVille even said it public yesterday. There's no cases
But
of
there's no
COVID.
space in the shelters.
There's
We also know
space in the
that. No,
shelters.
that's not.
There's
There
there's
actually
space
aren't.
in
I've
the
actually
shelters.
called. There's no
There's
space in the
space
shelters.
in the hotel.
And even then,
So
it's
then
not
they get
permanent
kicked
housing.
out. They get kicked out in the winter.
building
What
su-
then?
We're
What
building
then?
supportive housing.
What happens after the hotel people get kicked out?
So
What
we're
happens?
building supportive housing.
What happened to that program that the city ran, though, where money went directly to the landlord? Yeah.
I like housing, right? I don't want to work. I just want like housing. I want everything for free. Could I get that? Right? Please. I mean, look. I mean, that's what everybody wants, right? You fund the police. Give me food. Give me money so I can go buy my weed. Give me so I can go buy my alcohol so I can stay home.
They get way too much money. There's no way.
That's great. You fund the police, right? Look what's going down in New York. Walk down the streets of Brooklyn or Queens and see what happens, right?
Yeah, look
Find
what
the
happens
police.
at Lamport Stadium. People getting their skulls cracked open by police.
Really?
all the time.
We're asked to leave.
But how many more operations are going to happen to remove people from the encampments? There's been 3 major operations with many tactical units that have shown up. That doesn't seem like an appropriate response. How is that enacting this human rights approach to housing that you guys voted on like several weeks ago?
What I think is to
Right, bro?
continue
Hey, bro.
to happen is to
Bro,
have our
we're not
streets
here
to
for you.
home reaching
No, right?
out to the people, working with the people, building trust with the people, and bringing them inside.
I think that it's been shown that the
Lower
Streets
down,
of Home program
What kind of
has had
society we
very
have now,
few
man?
successes in their actual interactions with folks who are living on the streets, right?
start
I think
crying soon?
part of the purpose that the Encampment Support Network exists is because folks aren't listening to the actual needs and autonomy of people who want to be outside because they are not safe in the shelter system. We're not addressing safety of trans people, of women, of racialized people. There's a lot of violence that happens in the shelter, not just from other shelter residents, but from staff. Staff are violent towards residents. And of course, you can complain about those things, but a bad experience means somebody's not coming back to the shelter. I say that as a former shelter worker. I'm not saying this as an ignorant person. I used to work in the shelters, right? So a lot of people have bad experiences and they can't come back. They get treated disrespectfully, right? If somebody, a lot of the reason why people aren't accepting these temporary shelter offerings is because they've been afraid of catching COVID, which you're saying there's no cases of COVID currently
now,
in the
there
shelter
isn't,
system.
no.
That's great. That has not been the case up until now. That is a very
That's
recent
why
thing,
the
right?
city has hotel rooms, has
But even the
recovery
hotels, there's been a
We've
huge
building-
cases
we've been
of COVID
building
increasing.
supportive housing. We've continued to build supportive housing, and that's the solution. Is actually housing, right? That's what we want
need
to provide people.
decommodified housing.
Is to support housing.
What happened to that grant that you guys used to have to pay for rent for people,
on
right?
a list, and that doesn't even include the people who aren't like able to access that list.
Yep. And we continue to build housing and
It's
continue
not
to
enough. And
support
no,
housing.
why are you spending money on riot gear and pepper spray and horses? to
Rubber
criminalize-
bullets,
yeah, to
drones.
criminalize the poor and arrest people.
mother was afraid.
I now have to set a trial date because I was arrested yesterday at that fucking park, and that's going to take up more city resources, and that's what you want to spend your money on.
I'm really sorry to hear that.
It's
I don't wanna
unacceptable.
I hear you, right?
You are a
get it.
rich politician who has no idea what people on the ground are going through right now.
Seriously, people are
I'm not rich,
desperate.
and I am a politician. I've been elected by the people of
I know what the city of Toronto pays people. It's a hell of a lot more than people that we see.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the issue here. I think the issue here is what
That was given to the city of Toronto by the Toronto Drop-In Network that laid out a plan that had a sign-on from other organizations. And what did John Tory do with that?
Didn't answer
Streets
the question.
Streets to Homes wasn't there yesterday. Where were they?
like I said, I wasn't there yesterday. I can tell you.
Well, yesterday was...
Not discussed at the last council meeting. Why was it taken off of your agenda?
It wasn't taken off the agenda.
Why was it never added to the agenda?
It wasn't
We
part
have.
of
I
it.
thought you said you're fighting for housing. Why wasn't it on the agenda
There
then?
was 1,900 units of housing that were on the agenda. There was rooming housing on the agenda. There was vacant tax on the agenda. There was lots of housing.
So why not a platform
There was
plan forward?
housing issues on the agenda, and those were discussed, and they were approved, and we continue to build the housing for the people.
Let me
of
tell you
Toronto.
something, and you can tell John Tory that I said this, and that what you guys did yesterday is only making us stronger and more angry, and it's not gonna de-escalate anything. It's not gonna fix any problems. So you're gonna have a bigger mess on your hands if you don't start making some proper arrangements for people and start treating people like fucking human beings.
We need a rights-based
I hope we can
approach,
get
not a
your help.
developer-based
I hope
approach.
we can get your help to work with the residents that need the housing to bring them inside. I really hope that
Do you have an estimate?
I hope that we can work together to bring the people
Well,
inside.
we
and
put a
say-
proposal forward.
Okay, listen,
A path
how
forward.
about start with this proposal? And also, I just want to ask you something. The Novotel, okay? The Novotel hotel shelter that people have been put into for
homeless further to the spring.
So what happens to them?
So there's several of them that do not end in the spring.
I'm asking you about the one that does.
I'm not
and the ones
100%
that
sure
do.
when the
Okay, but I'm not
agreement
asking
comes.
you about the date. I'm asking you when they end, because they will.
Yeah.
They're not permanent. When they end, what happens to all of these people?
Well, we're
hundreds
hoping-
and hundreds and
What
hundreds
we're
of
working,
people.
what we're working is to make sure that this year alone we're having 1,200 units of supportive
And is
housing.
that
It's a
enough?
drop in the bucket.
It absolutely.
1,200?
We-
So many people living
1,200? How many people in
precariously.
hotels?
We need permanent housing. We don't
Exactly.
need these little band-aid
Just
solutions.
supportive housing, not including other affordable units. This year we have 1,200.
And is that enough? Is that enough?
No, we need every year. we
Okay,
need
so then
more
what?
and more.
I'm asking you though.
We need
what
more and
happens
more.
to the people that get kicked out onto the street from the hotel shelter?
Nobody's going to get kicked out of the street.
Okay,
I
listen to
think-
this. No one's going to
I-
get kicked out
No.
of the hotel shelters. You
we-
can
Can
you
we
can
put that
say
in
that.
policy?
Well, that I will make sure
And the
that to put
Novotel
that-
says it's open for business in the spring.
Just let her finish. She will make sure what?
We will need to make sure that we are not kicking out anybody out on the street. That we have enough shelter beds, that we have hotels and the supportive housing that is coming online and the affordable housing. That's what we want people. That's why everybody's working hard to have that supportive housing available for the people.
Okay, again, going back to what actually happens in the hotels, our experience of hearing from people who've been living at the hotels is that they get kicked out for random things, like for having water in their bedrooms, for bringing food into their bedrooms. They get checked up on at all hours of the day. That's not humane housing.
That's not
That is,
works-based
people have chosen to live in tents because the other options are not humane. They're not respectful of people's dignity. And so whether you say people will or will not be kicked out, it doesn't matter, because people working in the shelters do whatever the hell they want to do. It's up to their personal discretion. And those aren't shelter workers.
So as you know, a lot of the shelters are operated by some of our nonprofits, and the city works closely with the nonprofits. I think the city has been listening to what a lot of people are saying about
why
those
did they
issues,
crack skulls yesterday?
and working to address some of those issues. As you know, there's also an opioid crisis as well that we
Correct.
have in our city, and a lot of those checks are to make sure that people are okay. That's why those checks happen. Now, you're absolutely right. We need to make sure that they're done in a humane way, and we've been listening from a lot of people.
Okay, but I've asked you several times to talk about that program that the city used to operate where they had funding that people could apply to for rent subsidies.
We
Why
still do.
Okay, well, how much is in that fund?
We actually increased our rent bank to $6 million.
But how do you access the rent bank? Because I've heard many people say that they have not been able to access the rent bank.
So
They've not
anybody
qualified.
Could call 211.
Yeah.
And if you're having issues with housing, you can call 211 to ask for assistance, or go to one of our housing help centers and you can get assistance for your housing.
Okay, but when you call the rent bank, it really depends on who you get and how they talk to you. I have personal relationships with people who've had to access the rent bank this year. They lost their jobs during COVID. This is a separate issue around tenants' rights in the city, because how many tenants have been taken to the LTB this year? Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of tenants have been taken to the LTB. The city has not intervened at the LTB to say, we're going to protect you tenants. All that's happened is landlords have continued to receive the money from the rent bank. A lot of corporate landlords who have not had to suffer at all.
So we understand. We've also increased our funding for FTMA for them to actually support tenants in their fights with the landlord-tenant tribunal. We've created a subcommittee for rents rights. We have a tenant advisory committee. We're dealing with a lot of issues, from rent evictions to some of the issues you were talking about. So these are some of the issues that we're grappling with. Landlord-tenant tribunal is provincial legislation. It's part of the province, but it is something that we constantly calling on the province to ensure the tenants' rights are protected. We've called for a moratorium on evictions, but those are things that are not within the city power. It is part of the provincial government.
Well, we've seen the police go to enforce evictions as well, where they've brought much violence there. So the best that y'all can say and do is file a complaint, call the office. The office that investigates the police is run by the police and former police. What's that going to do?
And there is lots of reform that needs to happen with the police. Again, the Police Act is also an act of the province. The city cannot change the Police Act. So all those oversight bodies are bodies that are provincially legislated.
Well, what
and
advocacy
city
is
council-
happening on the part of council to change
if you
that?
go on the city's website, we actually have over 80 recommendations and 80 actions that we're taking on this issue, that you can actually see the updates on all our advocacy efforts, on all the actions that we are taking inside City Hall, and what is being done. So there's several projects, several advocacy, several pieces of work that is being done around this, and that you can check the progress. It's very transparent.
But in the meantime, Trinity Bellwood's assault happened 1 month ago to the day. Alexandra Park happened 2 days ago. Lamport happened yesterday. Tomorrow we'll have Moss Park. The next day we'll have Allen Gardens. Like,
Why are they
for
happening
sure.
this fast?
Why are they happening? Why are they happening the same way? Why aren't you and everybody who cares about it saying no, the
Demanding that
police
they
cannot
stop.
do this? Why don't you show up to an encampment eviction and put yourself in front of like all of our comrades are doing? Why don't you say stop? This is it's absurd. It's a violation of all constitutional rights, and it's all taking place on stolen land in the first place. We're all getting our skulls cracked there.
So I ask you that you advocate with us to make sure that we get everybody inside, and that we work with the people that live in the encampments to
Not
bring
against
them
their
inside.
will.
But-
Not dragging them by their fucking feet.
But respectfully, working with you, we worked with the people in the encampments and we said, police, don't hurt these people. And the police pepper sprayed and used batons and shoved people and have you seen the photo of the person with the knee on their neck? The cop's knee on their neck? I mean, the police say they don't do this, but they're doing it. And they're doing it again and again and again with complete impunity. If accountability doesn't come from your office or John Tory's office or does nobody have any sort of power
Over the police?
2 days ago,
There's accountability, like I said, accountability officers, and it needs to come from all of us as well.
2 days ago, as my friend just mentioned, Alexandra Park was cleared, right? Today, there's a film being shot in that park, a television
TV
show. When was that permit approved? How did that happen? Like, why is that?
Sorry, just give me 1 second. I need to speak to the
snacks soon, dinner soon.
Well, oh God. Truly, though, we really need an estimate of how much money was spent on these 3 encampment evictions, because that was many millions of dollars.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure whose mind that would change, but for sure.
Yeah, why the last man being filmed right now at Alexandra Park? I just walked by there.
I'm not aware of the permit. It's not my area.
When will you be able to provide an estimate of the amount of money that was spent clearing Lamport and Bellwood since Gadding Court?
As soon as we get it from staff.
It's been a few weeks already.
I don't know. I don't have it.
Can you
When will there be an inquest?
Even yesterday, I inquired. Sure. Can I get your email?
Absolutely.
And when will there be an inquest into police violence that's been happening? Not just at the encampment evictions, but I mean all over.
Will you request an inquest in the police violence that's happened at the encampments? As the deputy mayor, would you request an inquest into the police violence at Bellwoods, at Lamport?
Like I said, we need to look at all the actions that are being taken. And we
But
need
will
to-
you request an inquest into the police violence that happened yesterday at Lamport?
And 14 division.
And at
I
14.
think that we need to look at what happened and hear.
But as the
what they have
deputy
to say.
mayor,
Like
do
I
you
said-
have
like
that
I said-
responsibility to advocate for that yourself?
Like I said, I think that we're all looking into what happened, and
But what is
not
your responsibility to do that?
my responsibility, like I said, is to look exactly what happened and make sure.
So will you request the inquest?
Like I said, I'm looking into this.
Why will you
matter.
not request the
looking
inquest?
into-
That's not a direct answer, Anna. Thank you for talking to us, but I feel very unhappy with your answers and your responses. I think you will not request the inquest because you know the police union will come after you. It's excuses. It's bullshit. Just like this fucking pile of manure, Anna. Stop acting like a piece of shit.